Westside. Thank you for being here today. Thanks for coming to Westside each and every Sunday you can. To be with others in Fort Worth, Texas who are progressive, who enjoy exploring different ideas and cultures, and where free spirits are allowed to soar. It is a good place to be, and I thank you for being here on this 5th day of May. It promises to be a beautiful day today. Those on the Westside camping trip may have wished it would be a little warmer, but for the most part, I don't think they could have hoped for better weather. But those of you who have lived around here for a while know the weather has been a bit odd this past week, reaching colder temperatures than we typically experience this time of year. Weather, I think, is not always predictable, but patterns are quite possibly changing, and you can take nothing for granted anymore. It reminds me of one of my favorite bad stories. I'm pretty sure I've shared this with you before, and I think Stan Yoder may have said it to me recently, but others of you may have not heard this, so bear with me. A preacher and his flock at a very poor church in the hills of Tennessee took up collections, baked cakes, and washed cars for months to get enough money to buy paint for the church exterior, which was bare and weather-beaten. Finally, they went to the big box store and bought enough paint for the job, and all of them joined together on a Saturday morning to complete the task. When they were about halfway finished, they realized that they were going to run out of paint. The preacher said, well, it's water-based paint, so just thin it down with water. They continued painting and thinning until the color started losing its depth. And when they finally finished, it was dark green on the top, light green in the middle, and a very light green, almost white at the bottom. The preacher and his flock were standing on a nearby hill admiring their work when a dark cloud appeared, and the heavens opened up with a deluge of rain, which washed all of the newly applied paint off the church. Well, the preacher was in tears, and the congregation was stunned at all the hard work they'd done for nothing. And just then, there was a huge lightning flash, followed by a roll of thunder, and a loud voice from the heavens rang out that said, "Repaint, repaint, and thin no more." It was better the second time, well, anyway, what you may have found out on Twitter or on Facebook is that yesterday was a special day as well. It was Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you all. Still bad, I know, but I was told after the first service that tomorrow is also related to Star Wars, Return of the Sixth. That's all I got. Because today is the 5th of May. In Spanish, Cinco de Mayo. And in many places with large populations of people of Mexican heritage, you will find parades, you will hear concerts, you will see brightly colored traditional dresses, and the garb of caballeros. People might imbibe in drinks made with tequila. It's a festive time, a time that can be enjoyed by those both within the Hispanic community and hopefully those from other cultures as well. But the relationship between many people who celebrate Cinco de Mayo in the United States, particularly those who live in a state which borders Mexico, well, that relationship is strained, and it has been for a long time. In fact, it wasn't until I had left the small town where I grew up that I came to understand that the word Mexican was not always used pejoratively, but that it actually referred to a nationality, like someone from Canada can be referred to as Canadian. For some, though, this bitterness is still very much alive today. Some of the history is familiar to you, and some of this is reiterated with our story for all ages. Spain came to the Americas and conquered the native people, the Aztec Empire, in 1521. They were led by Cortez and others. New Spain was established. And the territory was huge by the late 1700s, stretching all the way up to parts of what is now Canada, all the way down to Central and South America. But in 1810, Mexico would claim its independence from Spain, fighting for over 10 years. Texas would claim its independence from Mexico and fight the final battle to establish their republic in 1836, and was then annexed by the United States in 1845. The Mexican-American War was fought to a great extent to finalize Mexican claims on the Texas territory that was formerly in their hands. Now, as you know, Cinco de Mayo does not celebrate Mexican independence from Spain, as many incorrectly assume. That celebration actually takes place in September, on the 16th. No, Cinco de Mayo celebrates just one battle, the Battle of Puebla, where in 1862, following the Mexican-American War, the Mexican army quite unexpectedly defeated invading French forces. In Mexico, Cinco de Mayo is still celebrated for that victory in Puebla. But in the United States, Cinco de Mayo is celebrated for additional or even different reasons. In the United States, Cinco de Mayo celebrates Mexican heritage and pride. But perhaps even more, it celebrates the ideas of freedom and democracy. It is a commemoration of pride, of freedom, and of democracy. Of being proud of where the people are from, but also being thankful for where they have come to be. Now, you may not know this, it may not be on your radar screen, but for the last 3 years, the Unitarian Universalist Association has recommended a common read for you to use. Many colleges and universities are doing this these days, recommending a book that all incoming students will read in advance and discuss in orientation and perhaps a first-year classroom setting. Everyone has read it, and the common read is, in some ways, their class's first bonding experience. Unitarian Universalists can bond around books too, I think. Many of us enjoy a good book, and if experience is any indicator, I also think we like to talk about our ideas. If you're interested in taking part in the next UUA Common Read, please send me an email. I'll keep track of who wants to participate, and I'll volunteer to lead the discussions surrounding the new book. The next Common Read will likely be announced this coming October. This year's Common Read is The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander, who teaches law at Ohio State University. You may have seen Alexander on Bill Moyer's Journal, the Colbert Report, Democracy Now!, or any number of other places. She was also a major speaker at last year's General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Last year's book was titled Acts of Faith, the story of an American Muslim, the struggle for the soul of a generation, written by Eboo Patel, whom many of you know founded the Interfaith Youth Corps in Chicago, and serves as an advisor to President Barack Obama on issues related to faith-based neighborhood partnerships. Both good books, I think, and they would, I'm sure, give opportunities for wonderful conversations. But the very first book that UUA recommended as a common read is titled The Death of Yoselin, Immigration Stories from the Arizona Borderlands, written by Margaret Regan, a journalist living and working in Tucson. The book is a series of stories of people who are leaving the poverty of their own nation to try and find something better. a better life, a better job, a better way of being here in the United States. No matter one's beliefs about people crossing the U.S. border for work, I think most people would find these stories contained in this book to be heartrending. The book came about when Regan uncovered the story of Jocelyn Quinteros, only 14 years old, who was found dead in the desert just barely a few miles into the United States. She had on what was left of a bright pink shirt that a girl that age may wear, and these bright green sneakers she liked so much, but that didn't do her much good in the rough terrain of the desert. She was trying to get to Los Angeles. That's where her mother was. And at the same time, she was trying to take care of her younger brother. But she became ill on the trip, and the coyote, the person who smuggles people across the border, left Jocelyn to the elements and to the animals that would later find her dead body. Promises that help would be sent were not kept, because any request for help involves the authorities, people who are charged with eliminating or at least curtailing the flow of people migrating into the United States. And to risk getting the authorities involved is a risk that the entire group would be caught. So the girl was left to die. And while the story of young Jocelyn is tragic, it is not at all uncommon. Thousands of people have died trying to make that trip. A trip that promises a better life in a land of freedom and democracy. Some were very young, like Jocelyn. Some were older and had health issues that caught up to them in the strain of trying to cross the border. And some were in perfectly good health, strong and capable, but because of a freak accident or a severe and unexpected change of weather, they too perished in the desert. But they all had one thing in common, and that was the belief that the risk was worth it. Almost everyone Regan interviewed who had been caught by the Border Patrol knew someone, many times their own relatives, who had died trying to come to America. Because things were so bad at home, jobs were so scarce, resources were so few and far between, that many believed they had little choice other than to try to cross the border into a land of great wealth. A land that had been made up of many others before them from different countries, of different ethnicities, who also desired a better life. Regan's own family history is comprised of her ancestors crossing the ocean from Ireland to start over, to leave a land that had become sparse, to come to the land of plenty. And our own history in this country seems to be to harass all groups who come here to better their lot in life. Everyone who got here earlier seems to tell those who come afterward, you are not welcomed here. You will not take my job. You will not be allowed to share in whatever wealth there is, forgetting that only a generation or two ago, their own people were the ones mocked and harangued for trying to do better. And each and every group who has come before believes their behavior is justified for whatever reason best suits their circumstance. It is, I believe, short-sighted, and it is, I believe, painful. Because people from Mexico and other Latin American countries who come to this country are often forced into jobs that few others want. They do housekeeping work, they will work in landscaping, bussing tables in restaurants, construction work, migrant farm work, and positions in slaughterhouses. It is often hard work, soul-breaking work, where they cannot complain of mistreatment or low wages because speaking up will bring in the authorities. and they will likely be sent back to the place they were trying to escape. Yet still they come, knowing that to cross the border is dangerous, knowing that if they survive the trek, what awaits them is backbreaking, mind-numbing work, knowing that they are not welcome and that many will despise them. And yet, still, they come. A lot of people are talking about immigration reform right now. In my reading, I've witnessed many progressive religious leaders speaking out on this issue. One of the rabbis I sometimes read on the Huffington Post news website is Sheila Peltz-Weinberg, and she reminds her audience of a passage in Leviticus. It's chapter 19, verses 33 and 34 that says, "When a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not wrong him. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." Now, you and I know the Bible can be used to justify anything. But I always appreciate those who use the Bible to extend compassion. And you might be wondering what the Unitarian Universalist Association says about immigration reform. And I'm not going to read you everything that they have on this latest issue statement, but I will read you a few things. It says, at a minimum, a moral immigration policy would include the following elements: a path to citizenship or legal permanent residency for those already in the country legally or illegally, as well as for those wanting to enter the country. Work visas that allow employment and do these 5 things. Require the same worker protections applicable to citizens, including fair wages, safe and healthful environments, and receipt of benefits. Work visas that do not depend on a single employer. Work visas that allow multiple entries. Work visas that permit entry into the path for citizenship. And work visas that provide parity between the number of visas and the work available in the country. The document goes on to say immigration reform should allow access to the same medical care and education available to citizens, due process under the law, non-deportation of parents with dependent children, and finally, collaboration with source countries to address underlying causes contributing to immigration. The UUA has made pronouncements about immigration reform in the past, but they are intently studying the issue right now, and there may be an even more definitive response coming soon. But we will see what happens as politicians begin to once again, perhaps, think about the possibility of maybe looking into immigration reform. You may be like me and not have a great deal of faith in the idea of politicians leading reform right now. But I do have a great deal of faith in compassionate people of all kinds, and my hope that perhaps goes beyond hope is that our country can have immigration reform that is compassionate. Because this issue is not going away. People will continue to cross the border just as they have in the past. So I can hope we as a country can remember that unless we are from Native American parentage, we were all immigrants at one time. I can hope people of faith will remember their scriptures of grace for those who are unprotected and simply want to improve their lot in life. And I can hope our politicians will have the capacity for compassionate leadership. On this 5th day of May, this Cinco de Mayo, let us all search our hearts and determine how we will respond when the topic of immigration reform presents itself outside the safety of these walls. Will where many will have much less tolerant views? Will we stay silent because it is easy, or will we speak up, even though that is very hard? As we rise together in body or spirit and join in singing our final hymn, number 305, Day of the Lord, we'll sing the first two verses.